A mule stumbled into the town square with an empty harness, its flanks streaked with mud and blood. Behind it rolled a battered freight wagon, one wheel splintered, the driver nowhere to be seen. The crowd rushed forward, not because they hoped to save anyone, but because rumors traveled faster than mercy on the frontier. Then they saw her. A broad-shouldered young woman climbed down from the wagon alone. Her dress was torn by thorn bushes, her boots soaked from crossing the river, and a leather satchel hung tightly against her side, as though it contained the last thing she owned. She looked exhausted, yet she stood straighter than anyone expected. "The driver didn't make it," she said quietly. "I buried him 3 miles east beneath the cottonwoods." Silence settled over the square. No one stepped closer, no one offered water. They simply stared. If you believe every person deserves a place to belong, stay with this story until the end. Her name was Clara Whitmore, 28 years old, raised on a struggling ranch where every broken fence, sick horse, and empty ledger had taught her something useful. She knew livestock better than many seasoned ranch hands. She could read contracts, balance books, and calm frightened horses with little more than her voice. But none of those things mattered to the people watching her. They noticed only that she was larger than most women they had known. Whispers drifted through the crowd. "She'll never find work. Not around here. Look at the size of her." Clara had heard those words before. She had learned years ago that arguing never changed a stranger's mind. So she picked up her satchel and started walking. By sundown, she had knocked on 7 ranch doors, 7 refusals. Some were polite, most were not. One ranch foreman laughed before she finished speaking. "We need riders, not burdens." Clara thanked him anyway. The words hurt. They always did. But hunger hurt more. As darkness settled across the valley, she found shelter beneath the porch of the abandoned stage station outside town. She counted the coins in her pocket. $2. Everything she owned in the world. She wrapped herself in a blanket and watched distant lanterns flicker across the hills where families gathered around warm tables. She wondered how long one could survive without belonging anywhere. The following morning, several miles higher in the mountains, Eli Mercer guided his horse through a narrow pine trail toward his isolated ranch. The ranch had once been the pride of the valley. Now it stood on the edge of ruin. Not because the land was poor, because someone was stealing from him. Cattle disappeared without tracks. Feed records no longer matched deliveries. 2 trusted ranch hands had quit without explanation. Worst of all, every complaint he carried into town somehow reached his rivals before sunrise. Someone was feeding information to the wrong people. Eli simply hadn't discovered who. He was 39, a widower, a man who spoke little because experience had taught him silence was safer than promises. As he approached his barn, he noticed fresh hoof prints leading toward the storage sheds. Someone had been there during the night. Again. Inside the barn, nothing appeared missing. That troubled him more than theft itself. Whoever entered wasn't searching for supplies. They were searching for something else, or leaving something behind. Hours later, Eli rode into town needing replacement harness leather. Outside the general store, he noticed the same woman from yesterday lifting a heavy grain sack that 2 younger men had struggled to move. She balanced it across her shoulder without complaint. The storekeeper blinked. "I didn't expect that." Neither did Eli. He watched as Clara carefully repaired a broken wagon axle, using nothing but spare bolts, rawhide strips, and a hammer borrowed from the blacksmith. The frightened horse beside the wagon stopped kicking the moment she rested one calm hand against its neck. Interesting, Eli thought. Very interesting. He stepped forward. "You've worked with horses." "Since I was old enough to reach their backs." "You repaired wagons too?" "My father believed every ranch survives only if everyone learns every job." Eli nodded once. Before he could ask another question, another rancher approached with a smirk. "Don't waste your time, Mercer." The man folded his arms. "She's already been turned away everywhere." Clara looked down, not in shame, simply because she was tired of defending herself. Eli studied her worn satchel. He noticed ink stains on her fingertips, calluses on both hands. boots repaired more than once. Nothing about her suggested laziness. Everything suggested endurance. "What are you carrying?" he asked. "My bookkeeping ledgers. You keep ranch accounts?" "I keep them honest." For the first time in weeks, Eli felt something stronger than suspicion. Hope. Because missing cattle could disappear. Money could vanish. But ledgers. Ledgers told stories liars couldn't erase. He reached into his coat pocket. $2 silver rested in his palm. "I'll give you $2 today," he said calmly. "Come to my ranch, look through my books. If you find nothing, you leave tomorrow with no obligation." The square fell silent again. Someone laughed. "You're paying $2 for her?" Eli never looked away from Clara. "I'm paying for skill." Clara stared at the coins. $2. Everything she had left in the world. Everything he was willing to risk on a complete stranger. She slowly reached for the money. Then a sharp voice rang out from across the street. "Don't touch those coins, Miss Whitmore, unless you want to be blamed for a crime you didn't commit." The laughter vanished as every head turned toward the speaker. Marshal Owen Briggs stepped onto the wooden boardwalk, dust clinging to his boots, his weathered hat pulled low against the morning sun. Unlike most lawmen, Briggs rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. When he spoke, people listened. His sharp eyes settled first on Clara, then on the $2 silver resting in Eli Mercer's open hand. "I'd think twice before taking that job," Briggs said. Clara slowly lowered her hand. "Why?" The marshal hesitated just long enough to make everyone uneasy. "Because someone has been stealing from Mercer Ranch for nearly 6 months," murmurs rippled through the crowd. "And whoever is responsible," Briggs continued, "has become very good at making innocent people look guilty." The words hung in the air. Eli slipped the coins back into his pocket but never looked away from Clara. "I didn't ask her to guard cattle," he replied evenly. "I asked her to read books." "That's exactly what worries me," Briggs answered. The marshal stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. If someone realizes she's looking through those records, she may become the next target. For a heartbeat, Clara considered walking away. She had survived rejection before. She could survive another empty day, but there had been something different in Eli's voice. He hadn't looked at her the way everyone else had. He hadn't measured her by appearance. He had asked what she could do. That question alone was worth more than $2. She looked at the marshal. "If I leave," she asked quietly, "does the thief stop stealing?" "No." "Then walking away only keeps them safe." The marshal studied her for several seconds before giving a slow nod. "I hoped you'd say something like that." The tension eased slightly, though the mystery only deepened. Briggs reached inside his coat and produced a folded sheet of paper. "I found this near Mercer's north pasture yesterday." Eli unfolded it. Most of the page contained ordinary supply figures, but one section had been carefully cut away with a knife. Whoever removed that piece hadn't wanted anyone reading it. Clara leaned closer. "May I?" Eli handed her the page without hesitation. She examined the edges instead of the writing. The missing section wasn't random. "You can tell?" She nodded. "Look here." She aligned the torn edge with her fingertips. The missing lines would have included payment totals. "You know that from one piece of paper?" "My father taught bookkeeping before he lost his ranch." She traced the faded ink. "These numbers are spaced for a ledger column. Whoever cut this page wasn't hiding names." She looked up. "They were hiding money." Several people exchanged surprised glances. Even the marshal looked impressed. Eli noticed something else. For the first time since arriving in town, Clara wasn't defending herself. She was simply doing her work. Without another word, Eli offered her the $2 silver again. This time she accepted. The coins felt heavier than their value, not because of the money, because someone had finally placed trust in her instead of pity. The journey to Mercer Ranch took nearly 4 hours through winding mountain trails lined with towering pines. Neither spoke much. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt earned. Late afternoon sunlight painted the peaks gold as they crossed a narrow wooden bridge over a rushing river. Halfway across, Eli suddenly pulled his horse to a stop. "What is it?" Clara asked. He pointed toward the muddy riverbank below. Fresh hoofprints. Several horses. Far too many for travelers. Clara dismounted before he could stop her. She climbed carefully down the slope, crouching beside the tracks. Someone else might have noticed only mud. She noticed patterns. 6 riders, she said. Eli frowned. "I count 4. 4 left." She pointed farther downstream. 2 never crossed back. His eyes narrowed. "How can you tell?" "The horses carried different weight." She brushed away loose dirt. "These 2 were loaded when they arrived." Her finger moved toward another impression. "They left without the extra weight." Eli followed her reasoning. "So they unloaded something here." "Yes. But why?" She looked toward the dense trees covering the opposite hillside. "I don't think they unloaded supplies." A long silence followed. "They hid them." Eli stared across the forest. No wonder cattle kept disappearing. Someone had found a place close enough to move stolen livestock without driving them through town. "You've been tracking before," he said. "My brothers preferred rifles." "And you?" "I preferred paying attention." For the first time in years, Eli smiled. It was brief, barely noticeable, but Clara saw it, and somehow that tiny smile carried more warmth than all the false compliments she'd ever received. Mercer Ranch appeared just before sunset. It was larger than she expected. Weathered fences stretched across rolling meadows, while sturdy barns stood against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains. Despite its beauty, something felt wrong. Workers stopped talking as soon as Eli rode into the yard. Conversations ended too quickly. Several men glanced toward Clara, then quickly looked away. Fear, not curiosity, fear. An older ranch cook named Martha welcomed Clara with fresh bread and stew. "You'll have the room beside the kitchen," she said kindly. "You must be exhausted." Before Clara could answer, a young stable hand burst through the door, pale as chalk. "Mr. Mercer!" Eli stood immediately. "What happened? The south breeding pasture?" The boy struggled to catch his breath. "They're gone." "Who's gone?" "The 3 mountain stallions." Silence crashed through the room. Those horses weren't ordinary livestock. They were worth more than the ranch's entire yearly profit. If someone had stolen them, Mercer Ranch might never recover. Eli grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. Then Clara noticed something no one else had. On the frightened stable hand's sleeve, a tiny streak of fresh blue ink, the exact same rare bookkeeping ink that stained the torn ledger page in town. She looked from the stain to the terrified young man, and suddenly realized someone inside this ranch knew far more than they were admitting. Clara did not speak immediately. Instead, she watched the stable hand wipe his forehead with the same sleeve, smearing the blue stain even farther across the fabric. Most people in the room had already rushed after Eli. Only Martha remained, clutching the edge of the kitchen table. "You'd better go," the older woman whispered. Clara nodded, but paused beside the ledger satchel she had carried all the way from town. She opened it. Inside rested a small bottle of deep blue accounting ink. She uncorked it. The color matched the stain perfectly. Not ordinary writing ink. Imported, expensive, rare enough that very few ranches in the territory used it. She slipped the bottle back into her satchel and hurried outside. The ranch yard had become a storm of shouting voices and saddled horses. Lanterns flickered to life as darkness settled across the valley. Eli stood beside the empty breeding pasture, studying the broken gate. No one dared interrupt him. The heavy chain hadn't been cut, it had been unlocked. "There are no signs of forced entry," Briggs observed, arriving from town faster than anyone expected. "That means whoever took them had a key." One of the ranch hands cursed under his breath. Another blamed rust on the old lock. A third insisted strangers had been seen along the ridge. Everyone had an explanation. Too many explanations. Clara quietly walked to the gate. She knelt, ran her fingers across the dirt. The hoofprints were fresh, but something bothered her. She looked again, then again. Finally she stood. "They weren't stolen from here." Several heads turned. The ranch foreman frowned. What are you talking about? The gate's open. Yes. And the horses are gone. Yes. So they were stolen. Clara shook her head. They were brought here. Confused silence followed. She pointed toward the tracks. These hoofprints all face into the pasture. Nobody answered. There are almost no tracks leading out. The foreman blinked. That can't be right. It is. She crouched again. The dirt outside the gate is packed hard. If 3 stallions had charged through here, we'd see deep cuts from their rear hooves. She looked up. We don't. Marshal Briggs slowly stepped closer. So what happened? Someone opened the gate after the horses were already gone. The realization swept across the group like a cold wind. The broken gate wasn't evidence. It was a distraction. Whoever planned this wanted everyone searching in the wrong direction. Eli looked at Clara with quiet admiration. You saw that in less than a minute. I've spent years finding what frightened animals leave behind. She brushed dust from her hands. People leave patterns too. Before anyone could respond, a rifle cracked through the darkness. The bullet shattered a lantern hanging beside the barn. Glass exploded. Horses screamed. Another shot echoed from the hills. Down! Briggs shouted. Everyone dove for cover. Eli grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her behind a stack of feed barrels just as another bullet buried itself in the fence post inches above them. The attack lasted only seconds. Then silence returned. Too much silence. Briggs cautiously climbed to one knee. The shooter is gone. Eli looked toward the ridge. No. He narrowed his eyes. He wanted us looking up there. Clara understood instantly. The barn. They sprinted together. Smoke curled beneath the large wooden doors. Someone had lit a slow-burning oil rag beneath a pile of dry hay. Another 5 minutes, and the entire ranch would have been ablaze. The ranch hands quickly formed a bucket line from the nearby well. Water splashed across the growing flames. Within minutes, the fire was out. But Clara wasn't looking at the burned hay. She was looking at the floor beneath it. Hidden under the blackened straw lay several leather-bound ledgers. Eli froze. My records. Someone had stacked every accounting book in one place. Someone had intended to burn them all. Briggs carefully lifted one of the ledgers. The edges were scorched but still readable. If these books disappear, Clara said quietly, no one could ever prove where the missing money went. The marshal looked toward Eli. They're destroying evidence. Eli nodded slowly. Which means we're closer than they've realized. Later that night, long after the ranch had settled into uneasy silence, Clara sat alone beneath the porch lantern, carefully comparing months of accounts. Wind rustled through the pines. An owl called somewhere beyond the fields. Inside the ledgers, she found something no one else had noticed. Every missing payment, every vanished cow, every delayed shipment occurred exactly 3 days before supplies arrived from the same trading company. Not every month, only when one particular delivery driver handled the route. She copied the dates onto a clean sheet of paper. A pattern emerged, too precise to be coincidence. Footsteps approached. Eli quietly placed a steaming tin cup beside her. Coffee. She smiled faintly. I thought you might already be asleep. I tried. He leaned against the porch railing. No luck. For a while, neither of them spoke. The mountains stretched beneath a sky crowded with stars. Finally, Eli broke the silence. You weren't afraid tonight. I was terrified. You hid it well. My father used to say courage isn't walking toward danger. She glanced at him. It's deciding something else matters more. He considered those words. I stopped believing people like that still existed. And now? He met her eyes. Now I'm beginning to. The moment lingered, warm, quiet, comfortable. Neither noticed Martha watching from the kitchen window with the smallest knowing smile. Just as Eli opened his mouth to say something more, the distant sound of galloping horses shattered the peaceful night. A rider burst into the yard, barely able to stay in the saddle. It's the North Crossing, he shouted. They found Jacob. The young messenger swallowed hard. He's alive. A pause. But before he collapsed, he said he saw the man who's been stealing from the ranch. Eli stepped forward. Who was it? The messenger's face turned white. He tried to tell us, but he only managed to say one name before he lost consciousness. That name was Clara Whitmore.